Very good afternoon to Professor S.S. Bhakar sir, Dr. Anjali ma'am, Dr. Jail Gupta sir, my dear colleagues. Uh, we are here in the second session of 14 days National FDP on Data Analysis for Research in Social Sciences. We have with us Professor S.S. Bhakar, Director, Prestige Institute of Management, Gwalior. Sir will be throwing some light on measurement scales of research variables. We welcome you, sir. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. There were a lot of questions on sample size in the forenoon session. I'll briefly talk about that for a minute or two and then move on to variables and measures. Uh, See, the formula that is used for computing size is that formula was given by Cochran, and the formula you can use if you like, or should I use the whiteboard for showing the formula? I think that is going to take time. I will have to go out of this and use the whiteboard. But the formula is simple, that the n is equal to, that is the sample size is equal to z squared s squared divided by e squared, where z squared is the critical value of z at the desired level of significance. Like say, if you use 5% level of significance, z would be 1.96. If you use 1% level of significance, z would be 2.56, and so on. So depending upon what level of significance you use, z value would be the critical value of z. Multiplied by s squared, s is standard deviation. Okay, so standard deviation, where are you going to get this standard deviation? You might take a small sample and compute the standard deviation and then use that, or you may get it from previous studies. If somebody has reflected what standard deviations they've got for similar population, you might use that as a standard deviation. But the best is to take a small sample and use that standard deviation. This standard deviation is going to be larger than normal, because when you increase your sample size, the standard deviation is going to go down. So this formula will give you a sample size that is larger. But then when you go for collecting data, you can correct that. When your data gets collected, for more data gets collected, you can correct that. So the sample size, the formula is n is equal to z squared multiplied by s squared divided by whole divided by e squared. E is the error accepted. That means how much error can you accept? Generally, you cannot, you should not have this value greater than greater than 0.05. All right, so this is how you can compute your sample size. But I know that there are two values that are trouble creators. One is standard deviation and the other one is error. Because if you say that your error accepted is 5%, 0.5, that is 0.05 or 5%, then somebody can question why 5%? It should be less. So when you compute size, standard deviation based on that, but if it is less than 5%, you can justify, because the type 1 error is 5% and it is considered as a barometer for this. So you can have error accepted less than 5%, which is acceptable. Right, so z squared s squared by e squared is the formula that's used for infinite population. For finite population, the same sample is adjusted. And again, if I try and quote the, there's a very small correction that is applied to this. And the formula will not be too much different. Now, I mean, the sample size will not be too much different. It will only be curtailed slightly. So I don't want to just discuss the formula, because it will not be, unless it is visible to you, you will not be able to understand. But it is available on net anywhere. You just type in for small sample in the statistical formula for computing sample size, and you will get it. And this Cochran's formula is also available everywhere for proportion and for the differences in mean, etc. So you can use either of for computing differences in proportion or for different computing in for relationship or computing the differences in mean. You can use that formula. So z squared s squared by e squared is for all the other tests for mean based tests, and z squared pq by e squared is for proportions. Anyway, that you can get formula anywhere, so I don't have to show you. All right. And adjustment is also you can find in the in Google. You'll get number of sites that will give you this. The only justification, that how would you give justification for E? That's the basic idea. S you can compute. So, and that is if you use less than 0.05, that is less than your level of significance, then it will can be justified. All right. So next session is on variables and measures. I have classified the variables into 3-4 categories to understand them clearly. We are going to look at all of them. But before that, we need to understand what is variable. Am I audible? Can somebody respond?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Because last session I found some of them have written that I was not audible. So it's important that I check. All right. So we are going to look at the types of variables slightly later. First, try and understand why variable. Right. So I have, I'll be using slides now. It will be better that you are able to see it. See, variable is any aspect, any characteristics or any attribute that you measure of a person, of a thing, of any object, and it varies from person to person or at different points in time in the same person. Whenever this characteristics varies, we can call it variable. So a variable is a measured characteristic. And again, very important thing is measured here. That means variable is when you measured characteristics that can assume different levels at different points in time or for different people or for different objects. Then we can call it variable. Right. So when we say variables in this study, that means these are different characteristics of either the population of the population that we are using, different characteristics of that, or different characteristics of the organizations that we use in them, or different characteristics of the products or other things that we use in our research. Right? So this is what variable is. A measure that can have only one value is called constant, that we know. A variable can be defined as an attribute of a person, etc. I talked about without the variability in data. Now, the important thing is, can we carry out research without a variable? We cannot carry out any statistical analysis without the variability in data, right? Because majority of the tests are based on either standard deviation or variance. And if you don't have, if the standard deviation is 0, if there is no variability, that means standard deviation or variance will be 0. And you cannot carry out any statistical analysis. That means to carry out any analysis, we need to have some variability in the data that you get, and that variability comes because of the variables that we use. So the concept of variable is just very important, basic. If without this concept, we cannot carry out research, right? So we should be conversant with what variable is to be able to carry out research. So variable concept of variable, to understand concept of variable is absolutely important. Variables are things that we measure or control. In case of experimental studies, we find that we control some of the the variables. In case of the other studies, we don't control, but we need to measure in any case. There are some variables that can be provoked, there are some that can be defined very narrowly. like if you look at behavioral variables, like say consumer behavior or workers' behavior in an organization, you find these are broad variables because they include a lot of variables in themselves. Like say consumer behavior may includes a host of variables in it: customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, dissatisfaction of the customer, purchase intention of the customer, trust by the customer, and so on. There are hosts of variables that are included in consumer behavior. So this is a broad variable. And if you take one of those variables, small ones like say trust, is again a broad, but less broader than consumer behavior. If you look at say loyalty, customer loyalty, it is again a slightly broad variable. It has two variables in it. One is intention to repurchase and intention to promote the product. So intention to purchase would be a narrow variable that way. So you need to understand what is broad variable. It incorporates number of variables in it. Variables, number of variables that you cannot measure directly need to be measured using indirect methods, like questionnaire, right? Like say attitude, motivation, satisfaction level. These are the concepts that cannot be measured directly. There is no tool. There is no direct tool that can directly measure them. There are indirect tools, like say questionnaire, etc., that we use. There are measures that are used measuring these variables. So we need to understand that such variables that cannot be measured directly need to be defined properly, because the definition should include what are the dimensions of that variable. And those dimensions, for each dimension, you need to have at least one statement to measure. All the dimensions should be measured. All dimensions of the variable should be measured. So whenever we look at a variable and want to convert that into a questionnaire or want to measure it using a questionnaire, you need to operationalize the definition of the variable. And that operationalization actually indicates what are the dimensions of this variable, right? So you look at number of definitions given by the others when you define variable, but then finally you should have your own definition of operationalizing the variable. Unless you have that own definition, you would not be able to develop a questionnaire or measure it. So operationalizing, and therefore, when you look at a research paper, unless if you have quoted definitions of a variable or 3, 4, 4 definitions of variables, it will not be considered complete unless you write that this is the definition I'm going to use in my study. Maybe out of the ones that are already there, that means others have already given those definitions, or you have your own, you develop your own definition by combining together the definitions given by the others or understanding from the definition of others, so that the dimensions of that variable are clearly visible or clearly there, defined in your definition. Then this is what is looked at by the referees or editors of good journals. Now I have defined number of variables. This is just to, I mean, this list, you can find these variables are thrown in at, in number of times whenever you carry out research. And I will try and, look at these variables. Some of them are similar in nature, but names are different. So we will be looking at, I have classified them into different categories, like variables that are used for classifying your population or your sample. Right? Those I have listed them as classifying variables. And naturally, these variables will all be category variables, or we call them attribute variables. Attribute variables, wherever we use it for, say, products, or for say shopping complexes, etc. We will use attribute variables. So what is categorical variable? A variable that has limited number of values. It can take up limited number of values, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, category variable can take up uh, a two category variable is also a category variable, like say yes, no. Gender, that means male, female, is a category variable. So this is used for classifying the sample into groups, like say gender. We can use gender for classifying the sample into male and female, or we can use say education qualification as a category variable, and that can classify again sample into people who are graduates, postgraduates, PhD holders, or below 10th, etc. So you can classify people into different groups using categorical variables. Attribute variables again are used for classifying, generally for products and shopping complexes, etc. So you find this attribute variable. So it works exactly like categorical variable. And in statistical software, it's not, the attribute variable is not manipulated because it is not a continuous variable. Only continuous variables are manipulated. So it cannot be manipulated in its variables. Then is nominal variable, another name for, see, nominal is a scale also. And nominal scale results into nominal variable. And nominal scale is used for identifying people. And therefore, nominal variable will again be for identifying people. That means again can be used for classifying people. Again, gender, this education qualification. In fact, even locus of control can become a nominal variable, high, low, or neutral. So with locus of control, internal, external, and neutral, that means could be one category and externals could be another category. So nominal variable is again a category variable, which is used for dividing population into different groups. Grouping variable is also a category variable for grouping people. Discrete variable is again for limited number of people, when limited number of categories. It can take up discrete values, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. That means there's no, if we are not using any value between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, it can be discrete variable. Binary variable, it can take up only two values, 0 and 1. And in fact, if you look at dichotomous variable, it can also take up two values. Binary variable and dichotomous variables are similar. Dichotomous variable is when a person can be, a person or a thing can be in those categories, it cannot be in the other, right? If it is, say, if you look at gender, it's a dichotomous variable. If somebody is a female, that she can't be male, that means either you are a male or a female, right? So that is a dichotomous variable. When you are in one category, you can't be in the other category. So if you look at these variables, all these variables are generally used for classifying. Even if you use for analysis, like say in binary regression, your dependent variable is either a dichotomous variable, it's a dichotomous variable. There also, we are actually classifying people into one or the other, and we get probability. What is the probability of classifying the person or the outcome into one of those two categories? So dichotomous variable is also a category variable. So these variables that are used for classifying population into various groups, right? So this is, and but the look at the different names that are used, and but majority of them are similar in nature and they are used for the same purpose. Let's look at the next. Based on, all right, these, if you look at these variables, next slide that you do look at, ordinal variable, continuous variable, interval variable. Continuous and continuous can be in two parts, interval or ratio. continuous variable can be divided in two groups, interval or ratio. These are results of, again, different scale, basic scales: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. You must have heard of. These are the four basic scales. They result of data, and they can also be called variables. Okay, so therefore I have included them in variables. And ordinal variable has classes, and but those classes, the difference between the category variable and ordinal variable is that you have ranking. That means if you are having 5 categories, then one category is better than the other. The third category is better than second, like that. Like, say, if we are looking at, if we are evaluating the quality of, say, delivery here in this session, we can start with very poor, poor, average, good, or very good. Right, so poor is better than very poor, good, average is better than poor, good is better than average, and very good is better than good. That means there is a hierarchy, there is a ranking. That means if you are able to rank, it's a ordinal variable, or we also call it rank variable. And continuous, as I said, it can be divided in two parts, interval and ratio variable. The basic confusion that arises here is whether a variable is a continuous interval variable or it's a ordinal variable. Or that means when you are using a scale, whether that scale is a ordinal scale or a interval scale. If we if we are not able to, if the difference between, say, first stays to second, first value to second value, second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth is not constant, right? Then it will be ordinal variable. If it is constant, it will be interval variable. Like, if we look at difference between, and from person to person also, when you are using, when two people are evaluating using a questionnaire, and if you are using, say, very poor to poor, some person looks at value, that is, he might give very poor to that, and the other person might give poor, because their way of evaluating is different. So the difference between very poor to poor for somebody may be very little, for somebody it may be very large. Same is the case with between poor to average, that the difference can be, for some people it can be very less, some can be very large. And people, when they evaluate, they don't consider the differences between them as equal, and therefore it is ordinal scale. That means Likert scale, if we are using, is an ordinal scale because it uses phrases to evaluate different characteristics. Phrases like very good, good, average, poor or very poor, or very high, high, average, low, very low. Right. So, or very frequent, frequent, average frequency, low frequency, very low frequency, like that. So you find these are ordinal scales. If you look at, if you can convert this into, say, numbers that evaluate a characteristics on a scale of 1 to 5, like, say, satisfaction level with a product, that if you divide it into, evaluate it on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 indicates highest satisfaction and 1 indicates lowest satisfaction, then a person is looking at them as numbers, values, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And between 1 and 2 is 1, 2 and 3 is 1. So difference is constant for one person between all the values and for different people between two values. So therefore, it will be considered as an interval variable. Though some authors or some statisticians say that it is also not a pure interval scale. Pure interval scale would be when we have measure. If you use measure, you use some distances, and you accurately measure those distances. Now, for application, that's extremely difficult, and therefore the numbers are used instead. So interval variable. And ratio is where there is a base 0. It is similar to interval variable. The differences are in two areas in ratio variable and interval variable. One is in ratio variable, it is the actual measurement. And okay, the measurement is actual, like say height, weight, uh, income, right? So, and there is a base 0. That these are the two differences. Otherwise, and same tools can be used for analyzing interval and ratio scales. The result of interval and ratio scale is metric data. The data is called metric, or data is has a metric nature, and ordinal and nominal scales result into non-metric data. Therefore, if the scale is nominal or ordinal, then we will use non-parametric tools. And if the scale is interval or ratio, a scale that you're using for measuring the responses, if it is interval or ratio, we'll be using parametric tests. So that is the base for that. This, the parametric or non-parametric. What scale are you using? Or that is what kind of data do you have, metric or non-metric? Based on relationship. So till now we were looking at whether the variable is continuous or category. Now we are looking at whether there are variables that indicate relationship or they affect the relationship. Let us see. Independent in a model. When you look at first one, we are looking at independent variable. A variable that does not have any other variable affecting it. That means when you draw it as a model, there is no incoming arrow to it. If the arrow indicates that a variable affects the other variable, then if there is no incoming arrow to a variable, we call that as an independent variable. The variable that is not affected by any other variable. Like in a study, suppose if we have 4 variables, like say trust, perceived quality, that is how the customers perceive quality, say perceived quality, trust that the customers have on brand, customer satisfaction. Say there are 2 variables, trust and perceived quality affecting customer satisfaction. Now in this, trust and perceived quality are independent variables and customer satisfaction as a dependent variable. Now if suppose if these 3 you connect them, customer satisfaction affects say customer loyalty, then the trust and perceived quality would be independent variables. The satisfaction would be another variable that we call variable. Okay, so we will come to that later. And loyalty would be a dependent variable, complete dependent variable. The mediating variable also has number of other names, so we'll be looking at that. So independent variable is one that is not affected by any other variable, and it affects the other variables. And this independent dependent can be called only when we are using a model wherein there are some variables that affect the others. Right, it can be an experimental, it can be experimental study or non-experimental. In both cases, whenever we evaluate a relationship between 2 variables, a variable affecting the other one is called independent, and the affected variable is called dependent variable. Now, next is the same. Another name to that independent variable is called treatment variable. If we use it in experiment, independent variable in case of experiment is called treatment. A variable that is varied by the experimenter, or a variable that is treated, okay, that is changed by the experimenter, that is called treatment variable. Or it is also a variable that is independent variable, because we will look at, by varying the independent variable, we will look at its effect on dependent variable. So this treatment variable is also a type of independent variable. but only in case of experiment we use this term. Predictor variable. Whenever we are using regression, etc., that means a tool that is used for prediction, then the independent variable is called predictor variable. In regression, we evaluate the independent variable becomes a predictor variable, and dependent variable depends on this, or the value of dependent variable can be predicted if we are able to find the value of independent variable, and therefore this name predictor variable is generally used only in case of either regression or structural equation modeling, where it works principally based on regression method. Right, so predictor variable. Manipulated variable. Again, treatment variable and manipulated variable are same. Manipulated variable is the variable that is varied by the researcher or experimenter. Again, it is used in experimental studies. Manipulator. In case of experimental studies only, it is used, but it's also an independent variable that is manipulated or changed. Next name used is explanatory variable. Again, it's an independent variable when a variable is independent, and this is used for known experimental studies. Explanatory variable is used in known experimental studies where one variable is affecting the other variable. Active variable is used for independent variable where the researcher can manipulate it. Then there is a term called exogenous variable. This is used more in EViews and structural equation modeling concepts. The independent variable is called exogenous variable. The variable that does not have any other variable affecting it. The variable that is completely independent. Okay, that is what is called exogenous variable. And another term used is antecedent, but generally this antecedent is used where there are multiple variables affecting a dependent variable, like say antecedents of customer satisfaction. So customer satisfaction is affected by multiple variables. We use a single for that antecedent. Okay, so multiple variables, when they affect a dependent variable, we call them as antecedent variables, right? So and when we use this term antecedent, a majority of variables that affect that dependent variable should be included. That means we need to be careful using this term antecedent, right? So these are some of the variables that are used in relationship studies. There are some more based on relationship. Endogenous is again used in structural equation modeling and EViews. EViews software uses it, and the softwares that actually compute or they work on structural equation modeling technique, they all use this term endogenous variable for dependent variable. The variable that is affected by the other variables is called endogenous variable. So dependent variable. And it is used only when you are using it either in structural equation modeling or when you are using EViews. Dependent variable is a common term used for dependent variable. That means when you have two variables, like say customer satisfaction and repurchase intention. When the customer is satisfied, he is likely to purchase. If you are evaluating relationship between them, customer satisfaction would become an independent variable, and repurchase intention would become dependent. Now, you also understand here that a variable that is independent in one study can be dependent in the other, or it can become a mediating variable in the other. Like in the same model, if I talk about that is trust and say this quality, perceived quality affecting satisfaction. Here, satisfaction is a dependent variable. Trust and perceived quality are independent variables. But if you want to evaluate effect of customer satisfaction on say repurchase intention or customer loyalty, here customer satisfaction is an independent variable, and so this is the independent and dependent depends on how the variable is used or where in the model the variable is used. Okay, so dependent variable is one which has at least one variable that is affecting it, or at least one incoming error if you look at the way the model is drawn. Then we can call it as a dependent variable. Test variable is another name used for dependent variable, but it is used in case of experimental studies. Test variable is, or the variable under test, we call it, is another name that is given to dependent variable and used for experimental studies only. Outcome variable is again another name for dependent, used for in experimental studies. So the dependent variable is given two different names in experimental studies: test variable and outcome variable. Responding variable, an informal term for dependent variable. Responding variable is a variable that responds to varying independent variable. So therefore, it's also a term that is used for dependent variable in non-experimental studies, and it is also an informal term. Generally, people use it only for talking, but for research work, etc., this term is generally not used. And last one is criteria, criteria variable. This is again a name for dependent variable for non-experimental studies. Criteria variable is again a name given for dependent variable for in non-experimental studies, not in experimental studies. In experimental studies, we use it as either a outcome variable, a test variable. Right. So these are based on relationship. Now let's look at next variables that affect this relationship. See, the previous slide we were evaluating for relationship between two variables. Now there are variables that affect this relationship. Right? We are going to look at that. The first one that we look at is control variable. Whenever we carry out a study, we try and look at relationship between two variables. Like say, I'll give you a example here. That is, say, since I have been using an example of customers, so I'll continue using that. Suppose if we want to evaluate the effect of satisfaction on customer loyalty. Now, there can be variables that might affect this relationship, like say gender. Okay, so or maybe income, customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. Income can change this relationship. So if you don't control for income, you might find that the relationship that we get between customer satisfaction and customer loyalty is not the actual one. It has been changed. It has been affected by another variable that is not part of our study. So whenever we carry out study, there are variables that are not part of our study, and they may affect the relationship or results. We need to control for them so that the results are not affected by them. That means if you are looking at say income affecting the relationship between customer satisfaction and customer loyalty, we may take say one group, one income group, and carry out study on that. That means we have controlled for income. So a control variable is a variable that is not part of the study, but the experimenter or researcher tries to ensure that that variable does not affect the relationship, or that variable is controlled. Right. Now we will see that there are other variables that actually also can affect the relationship, but they cannot be called control. Control, this variable is called control only when the researcher is able to control this. Next is intervening or mediating variable. Now the example that I had given, like say quality satisfaction and satisfaction affecting loyalty. Now they are on continuum. Okay, one line. First variable is quality, perceived quality. Second variable is satisfaction, that quality affects satisfaction, satisfaction affects loyalty. Now, in this case, satisfaction can be considered as mediating variable, that it is not the customer satisfaction affects the relationship between quality and loyalty. Okay, two variables, quality and loyalty, the relationship between them is affected by the customer satisfaction. So customer satisfaction can be used, this is also called intervening variable, can be used as a mediating variable. And there is a method of computing whether it is mediating the relationship significantly or not mediating. Right? So mediating variable. Okay. Next is moderating variable. Mediating variable is always part of the model, whereas moderating variable is outside the model, but we evaluate that. Like say, when we are carrying out a study on effect of quality on satisfaction and then satisfaction on loyalty, and that means satisfaction in working as mediating variable. Now suppose we also use one variable, gender. Okay, so gender can also affect this relationship, but if we don't use it as part of the model, we will call gender as a moderating variable. Okay, if we include it in the model, it will not be called moderating, it will become either a mediating variable or a variable that is affecting the dependent variable. But if we consider it outside the model, we call it moderating variable. Next is lurking variable, or a variable that is not part of the study, hidden variable also, and that affects the relationship between independent and dependent variable, but that is not controlled. Lurking variable is one that affects your relationship but not controlled. Right? So it is similar to control variable, but when you don't control it, it is called lurking variable. Confounding variable. Extra variables that have hidden effect on your experiment are called confounding variables. That means they will affect your results, but they are not part of your study. So therefore, you are not able to remove their effect. So they call it, they are called confounding variables. And extraneous variable. Any other variable that you are not intentionally studying in your experiment or test, but may affect the results, are also called extraneous variables. So what it means is that these three sets of variables, lurking variable, confounding variable, extraneous variables, these are not controlled, and therefore they affect your study. So as far as possible, that is the reason why we should use a maximum number of variables in our study, so that they don't become confounding variable or extraneous variable or lurking variable. Or either we control the variable or we use it in the model. We don't leave variables to affect the results of our study without controlling or not including it in the model. So it is very important to understand this lurking, confounding, and extraneous variables. A number of examples can be given for that. Confounding variable, extraneous variables, etc. Like say, whenever we carry out study, some variables that we don't study, because in any given study, like say in organization, I was giving example earlier. Performance is dependent on a large number of variables. Culture, it is dependent on motivation, it is dependent on skills of the workers, environment, working environment, etc. So there are a number of factors working. Now, suppose if we don't use environment in this study, and we try and evaluate the effect of motivation, skills use, and culture on performance, we find that this model may give us results that is not accurate, because the results are affected by the working environment. Right, so that can become either, that can be, working environment would be called either a lurking variable or a confounding variable or an extraneous variable, unless we control. Variable can be divided into two categories based on whether it is a quantifiable variable or it is non-quantifiable variable. A quantifiable variable is called quantitative variable, and a non-quantifiable variable is qualitative variable. Number of non-quantifiable variables have been now quantified using indirect measures, like say motivation cannot be directly measured, but then we can use indirect methods to measure the motivation, and therefore that can be converted into quantitative variable. Right. So qualitative and quantitative variables. Nominal and ordinal variables generally fall under qualitative umbrella, and interval and ratio fall under quantitative variable. Then random variables. Random variable is any variable, a variable that can take any values, and it does not vary in a direction, a unidirection. It can vary in either direction. Anyway, we call it random variable, and this has a very significant role in research. Majority of our independent dependent variables are random variables because they can take up values either side, and from person to person and time to time they change values, and they can be called random variables. Dummy variables, variables that actually have multiple values, but then whenever the variables have multiple values, and they can be converted into two values or dichotomous. That means a variable can be converted into a dummy variable. See, when we carry out research, specifically regression, and number of variables that are categorical in nature, you can't directly use them for carrying out a relationship between the two variables. So they need to be converted into dummy variables, like say they are converted into dichotomous, and you can use binary regression on them. Right. So dummy variables are the variables that may have multiple values, but can be classified or can be converted into two value variables. Next, steady variable is any variable that is part of the study. There are some other terms used for variables, specifically in structural equation modeling. And there are three terms used for variable that is measured: observed variable, and manifest variable. These are the three terms that are used for variable that is measured. Okay. Now I'll give you what does that mean. Say for say customer loyalty, we have number of statements. Generally, a 7-statement scale is a standardized scale for customer loyalty. There are 3 or 4 statements that are related to repurchase intention, and there are 2 or 3 statements that are related to promoting that as a brand. Right. So, like say, I will continue purchasing this product even if the price of this product is increased. I'll continue purchasing this product even if the competing product price is reduced. I'll continue purchasing this product even if the competing product is improved. Now, these could be some of the statements that would be part of, say, loyalty. And there could be other set of statements like, say, that I will promote this brand among my family members, or I will promote this among my friends or peers. And third could be that I will promote it from public platforms. So you have number of statements. When you try and measure on each of these statements, each of these individual statements are called indicator variables, because we measure, we get data on them. So they are called indicator variables, or they are also called observed variables or manifest variables. But overall, when we carry out, say, exploratory factor analysis on them, you might find, say, 2 factors. One factor may relate to repurchase intention, and the second factor may relate to brand. Now, so these three terms are used: indicator variable, observed variable, and manifest variables for individual statements. And when you carry out EFA, when you have two factors, and one factor is given repurchase intention, and second factor is given name, say brand ambassadorship, that these two would be called latent variables. The two factors that have emerged are called latent variables, right? So in structural equation modeling, these are common terms used: indicator variable, observed variable, manifest variable for measurable variables, and latent variable for variables that actually come to fore when you carry out exploratory factor analysis. Now, these were this is the classification of different variables. You would find all these variables listed, but the problem is that they are not generally classified into these categories. So it becomes easier to remember. Let's see the concept of scales. I have talked about them. Concept of scales: nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, and ratio scale. These are basic scales, or they result into these kinds of data. Nominal scale results into nominal data, ordinal scale results into ordinal data, interval scale results into interval data, ratio scale results into ratio data, or we call it interval and ratio scale result into continuous data, and nominal and ordinal scales result into category data, right? So, and or we say nominal and ordinal scale result into non-metric data, and interval and ratio scales result into, if you look at interval and ratio scales, result into metric data. So nominal and ordinal result, and interval and ratio metric. So parametric tests can be used for interval and ratio, and non-parametric can be used if your scale is nominal and ordinal. Now, just to give you some names of parametric tests, all these, your t-test, t-test, ANOVA, regression, correlation, these are all parametric tests, right? And non-parametric tests would be Mann-Whitney, U-test, etc., run test. So tests like that are non-parametric tests. So there are parametric tests and non-parametric tests. And in fact, for each parametric test, there are multiple non-parametric tests, right? So whenever you carry out a study, must use appropriate tests. If your scale was nominal ordinal, there's no point in using tests that apply to metric data. You must apply non-parametric tests because they apply to non-metric data. And when you are using a scale that would result into metric data, interval and ratio, you can apply all the parametric tests. All right, so this is for basic scales. I think that suffices for basic scales. Now, for any measure or any scale that you develop, or any questionnaire that you develop, or any indirect method or indirect measure you develop, that needs to be, see, whenever you are using a direct method, even for that you need reliability, validity, sensitivity. But for indirect method, it becomes far more important because reliability, validity, and sensitivity are not visible. Whereas for direct methods, at least reliability, validity, and sensitivity both can they are visible. Like say if you use a scale to measure height, but when you measure height twice, 3 times, 4 times of the same person, if the height comes out to be same, but if the height varies slightly from each measurement, you find that tape is not reliable. Okay, and but in all these measures, tape may give you wrong height. That means the divisions in tape are not correct, suppose. But every time you measure, it gives you the same height. Now, validity will be when the height, the tape gives you accurate height. That means if you use any other measure, and check that the height is correct, and the tape also gave the same value, then, and the other measure is considered as valid, it has already been evaluated, then you can consider tape also as valid. That means validity pertains to accuracy, and reliability pertains to repeatability. Means whenever you carry out the measurement, every time it gives you similar results. So whenever you use a questionnaire, if it gives you similar results every time, it is reliable. And if it gives you different results every time, then it is not reliable. Whereas in validity, it should give you correct results. That results might vary, but the mean or average of those results should be correct. So that means individually, reliability and validity both will not ensure that the tool that you are using is perfect. But combined together, reliability and validity ensure that the tool is perfect for use, for evaluating or measuring a particular variable. The third term that I have used is sensitivity. Sensitivity is how many divisions can you have for measurement. Like say, if you use a scale for measuring customer satisfaction, we can use, and if you are using a numerical scale, we may use a scale 1 to 5 as the numbers. That means 5 indicating highest satisfaction, 1 indicating lowest satisfaction. You can also use 1 to 7, where 7 indicating highest satisfaction, 1 indicating lowest satisfaction. And you can also use 1 to 9 or 1 to 10, where 10 indicating highest satisfaction and 1 indicating lowest satisfaction. The idea is, how do you decide? How do you decide that you use either 1 to 5, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, 1 to 9, or 1 to 10 scale? Sensitivity depends on your respondents. Whether respondents would be able to evaluate or will be able to understand that minute difference. If you use a scale of 1 to 10, and if you measure satisfaction, the respondents will not be able to give correctly the satisfaction level of 9. They will not be able to differentiate between a value of 9 and 10. That for a particular level of satisfaction, whether they should give 9 or they should give 10, they will not be able to evaluate that. And therefore, you should not use high sensitivity scales for indirect measures, very high sensitivity scales for indirect measures, which are subjective, and people will not be able to evaluate minute differences. Whereas if you look, say, stock market, and if you're trying to evaluate, say, Sensex, how it is varying, people can easily evaluate it on a scale of 1 to 10, even if you are not using the exact values of, say, index. If you are measuring it, whether it is high, low, very high, you can easily understand the difference between 9 and 10. So for that, you can use a scale of 1 to 10. Also, it depends on respondents. For uneducated people, a number of gradings would create confusion. So generally you find a grading of 3 or 5 is used for uneducated people, and not more than 5. And for highly educated people or educated people, you can use up to 1:7 for indirect measures, and 1 to 10, etc. Right. So sensitivity is very important because it will not give you your questionnaire or whatever measure you are using will not give you correct results if the sensitivity is not correctly identified. You should use correct sensitivity and not low or high sensitivity. Right. So reliability, validity, and sensitivity, all three are important for measures to ensure that the measure would give you correct results. Now, these are the subject variability, observer variability, situational variability, instrument variability, and data processing variability actually create problems for both reliability and validity. Subject variability means a person can give response, different response at different points in time because of his, mental state and psychological state. You find he can give different values at different points in time. So therefore, there is a variability, and that can create problems for your reliability and validity. Observer validity, that means if you are using somebody as an observer and he is observing a phenomena or some something happening, he might record a wrong. He can also, his perception can change, can vary, and therefore the values may be different at different points in time and between different observers. Situational validity, even the conditions under which the measurements are made can also vary. Like say, if you are asking somebody to give response on, say, satisfaction, and you are doing it in a busy market, he might, to get rid of you, he might just say extremely satisfied. He might say I'm extremely unsatisfied, just to ensure that you would not ask second question. So situational variability is also, that also creates problems for your reliability and validity. Instrument variability, that means when you develop an instrument, you find that if you develop two instruments to measure the same phenomena, you find two may give you different results because they will have different wordings. Maybe the instruments are supposed to be equivalent, but they may have different wordings, because of which you find that the results may be different. Even in same instrument, there could be some words that can be misinterpreted, and because of that, the responses can be different by same people and between different people. And data processing variability, that means you may, while editing, you may create problems, and while analyzing data, while evaluating, or while carrying out statistical analysis, you might use wrong methods, etc. So because of that, there could be processing variability. Like say, I'll give you an example. While editing, if you replace all the cells for which the respondents have not given response by a mean value or a median value, naturally that cannot replace the actual values that the respondent might have given, because if somebody has not responded to a particular statement, the respondent would have been on extreme, either lower side or higher side, and that is the reason why he did not give the response. And we are converting it into either a median or a mean, and because of which there will be, it will create problems for your reliability and validity. If we look at reliability, there are three basic types of reliabilities: inter-rater reliability, test retest reliability, and internal consistency reliability. Now, what is inter-rater reliability? When you are using raters, that means respondents. Okay, raters are nothing but respondents. So when you are evaluating differences between the respondents, whether they are giving different responses, it will be called inter-rater reliability. Test retest is when you use the same instrument to collect data twice or multiple times from same respondents and evaluate whether the results are similar. That means respondents are giving similar responses when you are collecting data using that instrument multiple times. So that would be test retest reliability. And the last one, internal consistency reliability. Whenever you develop a instrument for measuring one variable, all the statements in the measure must be measuring the same variable, and you should not have statements that would measure some other construct or some other variable. So therefore, the statements should have, or the responses on each statement should be closer to the responses on all the other statements in that questionnaire. That means correlation, there should be a high correlation between these statements. There should be a high correlation between the statements to indicate that the statements are measuring the same variable. However, if the two statements have a correlation coefficient of 0.9, it's a very high correlation. It should result into very high reliability, but we are using a redundant statement then. We are adding a statement that's not needed. If the correlation between two statements is greater than 0.9, then one of those statements should be dropped. And in all the statements should have correlation that is higher side so that the internal consistency is high. The tools that are used for internal consistency, split half, Gutmann, Cronbach's alpha, these are the tools that are used for measuring internal consistency reliability. And nowadays, the most popular is Cronbach's alpha. We will be looking at the Cronbach's alpha slightly later, just now, in fact. Is inter-rater reliability I have computed. It works exactly as your chi-square. You must have computed chi-square expected frequency. EA here is expected frequency. You have actual frequencies like say A, B, D, C, D. These are actual frequencies. Then that means actual number of raters who have said yes, actual number of raters who have said no. Okay. So these are 4 conditions. So, and based on that, you can compute the expected frequencies, and using those expected frequencies, you can compute the inter-rater reliability, that is kappa. And kappa uses this formula: observed frequency minus expected divided by total frequency minus expected. If you use this formula, you will be able to get inter-rater reliability. We call it kappa. Generally, this is used only when we are developing a new scale and we want to publish that as a scale. There we need to actually indicate that inter-rater reliability was also computed, and the kappa is this. And if you look at, you find 0.8 and above is considered almost perfect, and 0.6 and above is considered as very good. So 0.6 and above is perfectly okay. Below that is not acceptable. Or it is moderate, fair, slight, or poor. This is not acceptable. This is Cronbach's. This is internal consistency reliability, Cronbach's alpha, and the formula used is K divided by K minus 1. What is K? K is number of variables, number of statements. Variables means number of statements in the scale. So number of statements, if there are 7, then K will be 7 and K minus 1 will be 6. So 7 divided by 6 would be the numerator, and denominator would be 1 minus sum of item variances. That means for each item, we are computing variance and summing that together. So 1 minus sum of variances. Generally, it will naturally be less than 1. Sum of variances would always be less than 1. And therefore, the value would always be, and if it is more than 1, the value would be negative. That means Cronbach's alpha would value would become negative. But generally, you find if your scale has been okay, it will be positive, and it should always be greater than 0.7. Acceptable, adequate reliability, and 0.9 gives almost perfect reliability. And for individual individual monitoring, it should be greater than 0.5. That means data collected from individual should be greater. Individual means one individual, and multiple times. Data is collected multiple times. It should give, the reliability should be 0.9 and above. So 0.7 is adequate reliability. You can have, that means instrument can be considered as reliable if your reliability is greater than 0.7. right? So we looked at split half is another method, that old method that people have been using, and the formula that for that is 2r divided by 1 plus r. 2r is reliable this uh, correlation coefficient. So that means you develop the correlation between the two sets of data when you divide the into two odd and even, right? So you develop correlation coefficient, and then you can use this 2r divided by 1 plus r formula to compute the split half reliability. Guttman reliability is also computed using a correction in split half. So there are different methods that you can compute, but Cronbach's alpha is considered the most efficient coefficient of internal consistency reliability. Right. So that, and validity, we have one internal external validity. Internal validity is the validity of your research. External validity is whether the results of your research can be generalized, or what is the validity of your research for the population for which you conducted the research. So internal consistency is only of your research. That means based on your data, based on your sample. Where external is for the population. And conclusion is whether the conclusion that you've drawn are valid based on you find the constructs or the concepts that are available. And this is the classification of validity: face validity, content validity. These two, face and content validity, are in the control of the researcher. Researcher actually computes them, or actually reflects that my validity is high. And content validity can be supported using references. That means you can use multiple references to support your content validity. Criteria validity is predictive and concurrent. That means you can verify if you are projecting something, whether your projections are correct. You can verify using past data. We call it concurrent, and you can verify it using future data later on. We call it predictive validity. And finally, we have construct validity. There are three: convergent validity, discriminant validity, and nomenological validity. Convergent validity is consisting of three parts: average variance explained, factor loads, and construct reliability. These are three that make convergent validity. Convergent validity is whether the factor, if you have a scale and if you have three factors, whether each of those factors has good validity. So for that, we can use average variance explained. We can use construct reliability and factor loads. Discriminant validity is when you're having two constructs, whether they are able to give you entirely different results or different responses. That means when you carry out factors are supposed to be they are supposed to be different. Each factor is supposed to be entirely different from the other. So the data in one factor and data in the other factor must be different. So you should be able to have discriminant validity, high discriminant validity between factors. And nomological evidence is based on conceptual understanding that your results are they can be verified using the concepts. That means based on they are based on concepts otherwise. So this is what I had to cover in this session. You can ask whatever questions you want now, or I can take up questions from both sessions if you want.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll just take up the questions that are related to this particular session, sir.
No issues.
There is one question which is related to that from Rakhi Saxena. She is
Okay.
asking that what is expected frequency when we are calculating kappa value, sir? There are a lot
Expected.
of questions on kappa value, sir. उसके
Okay,
बारे में
okay.
काफी है.
No issues. Expected frequency is computed just like our chi-square. In chi-square, we have, say, frequencies in the cells. And then we compute expected frequency. Expected frequency is row total divided by column total for that cell. उस cell का row का total and column का total. So row total divided by row divided by column divided by total. I'm sorry. Row total multiplied by column total divided by the overall total is computed for that cell. And like that, we compute for all the cells. Understood? Expected frequency is row total multiplied by column total divided by overall total. Overall total means total of rows and columns.
Okay, sir. There's another question, sir, that is on variables that it is from Jasprit Kaur, Ritu Singh,
Okay,
and
no
Lataksha Nair. They are asking that what is the difference between lurking, confounding, and extraneous variables, and how to deal with the hidden variables, sir?
All three actually are different names used. Exogenous is used in, these names have been given because of, different people giving different names to these variables, but they are same. Lurking variable, exogenous variable, these are all, name given to the same variables that are not part of your study, but are affecting your results. The only way you can deal with them is by including them in your study. That means whenever you use a model for carrying out study, you must include the variables that can possibly be included. If you leave some of the variables, what we do is pick and choose. That means we like some of the variables, so we pick those variables, and we don't like some of the variables, or we don't get, say, ready-made questionnaire on some of the variables, so we drop them. But conceptually, we know that this variable is affecting the relationship between the variables that I'm taking or that I'm using in my study, the other variables that I'm not using in my study, right? So as far as possible, we must include. And second can be controlled. That means whichever variable can be controlled, we may not include it in the study. We should be able to control that. Now I'll give you an example. How can we control? Like say, if we are looking at say let's see the say I'll continue with the performance, say worker performance model. And if we've taken, say, motivation, and generally if you will find a large number of studies using motivation and skills affecting performance. Now, these are not the only variables that would affect performance. There are so many others. Culture, that means the person having a relationship with the others in the organization, how he is treated by the others in the organization, what is the culture in the organization, is it supportive or is it not supportive? That would affect the performance. The performance would also be affected by the experience the person has. The person might have good skills, but he might not have the experience to evaluate all kinds of variations that he is going to deal with, and therefore the performance can be lower. So there are other variables that would affect his performance. Now, what should we do? If we carry out research in a single organization, the culture cannot be a variable because culture is same in that organization. That means culture is controlled. So we can leave that culture. If you look at experience, we may classify the workers into different categories. Workers having more than say 7 years experience, 1 to 7 years experience, and less than 1 year. Generally, you find that you don't learn anything on more than 3 or 4 years. After 3 or 4 years, you're learning new things on same platform on which you are working is zero. So that means if you classify in them less than 1 year, 1 to 3 years, more than 3 years, you find, and you evaluate within categories, then you have taken care of the experience also. This is how you do it. So you are able to control the effect of experience. You are able to, and within you are having say study carried out on one organization. That means if you are taking data from also, you must also evaluate that within the same organization is the relationship between motivation and say skills level and performance same with respect to the other organizations. If it is same, that means the culture is not affecting, right? And if it is affecting, that means you need to evaluate individually each organization, or use culture as a independent variable. So if you use culture as an independent variable, again it will give you correct results, right? So that is how you either control it or use it in your study. These are the only two methods. Any other? I think I have I'm clear about it. I made it clear.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you have made everything clear. There is no more question that is relating to it, which we have not covered. There is one question that is there, which is relating to that there in SPSS, when we see variables
Okay.
view, it shows 3 categories of variables: the nominal, ordinal, and scale.
Correct.
Sir, they want to know,
Scale.
this is Dr. Dimple, she wants to know your point of view on it. Though we'll be doing SPSS, sir, but just your point of view.
No issues. On scale, the scale is both interval and ratio. Actually, scale is indicating metric data. See, in SPSS, we divide into metric and non-metric. But non-metric, we cannot have together, because on nominal data, we can only get frequencies. Whereas on ordinal data, we get ranks. So therefore, tools that can be applied on nominal cannot be applied on, tools that can be applied on, say, ordinal data cannot be applied on nominal. Therefore, nominal and ordinal have 10. But all the tools that can be applied on interval can also be applied on ratio. Therefore, they have been clubbed together and they are indicated under one, that is called scale. Okay.
Okay. Sir, we'll just take up one last question because we are getting a lot of questions on Likert scale that are there.
Yeah, no issue.
So one question that is being, there is Kanu Priya has asked, Dr. Dimple Khosla has asked. In sum of the question is that Likert scales or rating scales are at ordinal scale of measurement. Then how some psychological researchers use Likert scale and yet apply the parametric statistical tests for it?
Well, that's a wrong use of tools. See, in Likert scale, we use phrases for evaluating. And whenever we are using phrases, the phrases are, you might use numbers on top of the phrases. Still, the respondent is going to look at the phrase and give response. And the difference between phrases will be different for same person and different for different people also. And therefore, it cannot be considered interval or ratio scale, or it cannot be considered as giving metric data. And therefore, in my view, this is a wrong use of tool. But same scale, the statements may be same. But if you evaluate it on a, say, numeric scale of 1 to 5, and don't write phrases, but say numeric scale of 1 to 5, and don't write phrases under each one of them. Okay, and write, say, 5 indicating maximum and 1 indicating minimum, and in between there are no phrases. then the respondent is forced to consider as values and not as codes. And once they become values and not codes, it becomes an interval scale. So that means if you use, I mean, pure Likert scale has phrases. But if you use a modified Likert scale, and instead of using phrases, if you use numbers and use only extreme phrases, 2 phrases for extreme only, it can be converted into an interval scale. And people use. And they don't use pure Likert scales.
Okay. Thank you, sir. It is the presentation that you have discussed today, sir. It has opened a Pandora of questions that is there with the which the participants have. Many more questions are there in line, but I think that most of the questions will be answered are relating to more other specialized fields that are there, which will be answered when other experts come up for their discussion. But yes, sir, a very good start that you have given to this faculty development program, and we are very thankful to you, sir, for giving direction to this program. A well explained session, sir, that was there. A lot of compliments I'm receiving from the in the chat box, for which I am thankful. Sir, in a very simple manner, has clarified the different types of variables and type of data to which it must be applied. Sir has also discussed in detail the concept of reliability and validity for us, and all the questions that we think are available have been answered by you, for which we are thankful, sir. We are really thankful, sir, for gracing the occasion and being a part of this faculty development program. Thank you, sir, once again, sir, for being there with us. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if there are questions, if people have questions, and if they want to contact me, my email ID is with you. You can share it with them. And but they might have to wait for 2-3 days, 4 days. At times, I'm extremely busy, so I might not reply the same day. But I will definitely reply. So
Sir,
if
yes,
somebody
that I know, sir. All you mentors are, sir, so good at replying and helping us all researchers and give us direction wherever we get stuck up, for which we are all of us are very thankful to you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you again, sir, for being there for us and taking out time for these sessions, sir. Thank you. It was a much awaited session from your side, sir, which was due for a long time. Thank you, sir.